So you're looking to get smart fast, right? Maybe prepping for a meeting or just trying to understand some complex topic everyone's talking about.
Uh-huh. Without getting totally bogged down in details.
Exactly. And that's what we do here. Today, we're jumping headfirst into something called anti-logic.
Yeah, that's right. This idea comes from Akome. He calls it EA and frames it as this kind of, well, almost like a mental toxification.
Toxification.
No,
Wow. Affecting individuals and, like, society as a whole.
that's the idea he presents. Yeah,
Okay, so anti-logic, it sounds like more than just being, illogical. The source seems to suggest it's almost active.
it is. Think of your compass of reason, your basic logic. Anti-logic is like turning that compass around and deliberately going the opposite way.
So you know the logical path, but you choose not that.
Exactly. Like getting really solid advice and then consciously doing the complete reverse, even if you suspect it's a bad idea.
Huh. That's wild. Almost self-sabotaging in a way. The source uses some really big examples to illustrate this, starting with religion.
Yeah, it gets quite deep quite quickly. First up is Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita.
Okay.
So you have Krishna telling Arjuna, the warrior, to fight. And this is war against his own family, his cousins.
Right, a really heavy, morally complex situation.
Mhm.
Violence, family ties, all of it.
But then the source points out this apparent clash with later Vaishnava traditions,
Mhm.
the followers of Krishna, who often strongly emphasize pacifism.
Ah, okay. So the founder figure advises war, but later followers are pacifists. How does he reconcile that?
Well, he mentions that movie ADMB, where there's a line about Krishna not permitting weapons. It highlights the popular perception, maybe?
Interesting contrast.
But the key thing is why Krishna tells Arjuna to fight. The justification given in the Gita is that fundamentally, no one truly dies. It's all illusion, Maya.
Whoa. Okay, so fight because death isn't real in the ultimate sense. That's
Mhm.
quite a justification for going to war.
It is. And it shows how an initial concept, even a justification for a violence, can exist alongside or even seem to contradict later interpretations focused on peace. It makes you wonder, how does this kind of toxification or twisting happen for us in other parts of life?
Yeah, how do core ideas get turned around like that? The source then pivots to Christianity, right? And the Inquisition. That's a stark example.
Incredibly stark. You have the core message, love thy neighbor as thyself. Pretty clear.
Seems clear. Yeah.
And then you have the historical reality of the Inquisition, religious wars,
Yeah.
where, as the source puts it, differences in belief became reasons for, well, immense suffering and conflict.
So the exact opposite of loving your neighbor.
Pretty much. And the speaker in the source is quite direct here, suggesting that in these cases, religion was actually used to increase suffering, not alleviate it.
That's a heavy thought. It really drives home how any powerful idea system can be manipulated, I guess.
Which leads directly into his point about vigilance.
Vigilance. Against what, exactly?
Against what he calls non-perfection. Basically spotting these deviations, these dangers, no matter what your belief system is.
Okay, so be watchful for things going wrong, for imperfections.
Yes, and he links this to his idea that the world is fundamentally perfectly arranged.
Perfectly arranged. That's a big claim.
It is. And according to him, those who act against this perfect arrangement are Satanists.
Whoa. Okay. Strong word. Does he mean like literal devil worshippers?
Not necessarily. He makes a distinction. There are conscious Satanists who deliberately undermine this perfect order, and then vulgar Satanists.
Vulgar Satanists.
Yeah, people who act against the perfect order unintentionally, maybe through ignorance or because they've fallen into anti-logic without even realizing it. The focus is on the effect of the action on the order, not always the intent.
So it's about disrupting a perceived natural or perfect way of things, intentionally or not.
Exactly. And it raises that question for us, doesn't it? How do we even know what this perfect order is?
Right. How do you recognize it to protect it?
And that's where he brings in wisdom. Referencing, actually, a Christian idea. Praying for the wisdom to know the difference between what you can influence and what you can't.
Ah, the serenity prayer concept. Okay. Discernment.
Precisely. Understanding where our actions matter and where they might be futile or even counterproductive against this non-perfection.
Okay, so we've had these really big philosophical, religious examples, and then the source completely switches gears to football. The offside rule.
Yeah, I know it seems like a leap, but it's actually a brilliant everyday example of potential antilogic.
How so? The offside rule seems logical to stop attackers just hanging around the goal waiting for a long pass.
That's the standard justification, sure. Prevent that specific tactic.
Hmm.
But the speaker offers an alternative view. What if offside was only called when the attacking team loses the ball and an opponent is then behind them?
Wait, so the attack loses possession. Then you check if a defender was caught out.
Kind of. His point is, the current rule can stop an attack before it even develops fully, based on positioning.
Okay.
His alternative focuses on preventing the defending team from gaining an immediate, perhaps unfair advantage right after a turnover. It's about maintaining attacking momentum.
Huh. That's actually quite different. One prevents passive waiting, the other prevents a sudden defensive advantage after play changes.
Exactly. And he argues the current rule, which is over a century old, leads to these artificial offsides. Situations where the whistle blows, play stops, and maybe makes the game less dynamic, less interesting.
Yeah, you see those tight calls all the time that kill promising moves.
Right. And he stresses the non-symmetry. Two seemingly logical solutions, but they prioritize different things and have different effects on the game's flow.
It really makes you think about unintended consequences of seemingly logical rules. Okay, where does he go next? Science.
Yep. To something really fundamental, the speed of light.
Okay, C, the constant. We all learn that.
Right. It's like Physics 101. Speed of light in a vacuum is constant. But the speaker floats an idea he apparently developed years ago. What if light accelerates?
Accelerates, but all of physics says it's constant. How?
Okay, here's the twist. He's not talking linear acceleration like a car going faster and faster in a straight line. He suggests it accelerates volumetrically.
Volumetrically, like in cubic meters per second.
Exactly. So imagine light spreading out from the sun. The volume that light occupies is increasing at an accelerating rate.
Whoa. Okay, my brain hurts a bit. So the expanding bubble of light grows faster and faster in terms of its volume.
Uh-huh.
But how does that fit with us measuring its speed, point to point, as constant?
That's the really mind-bending part. He suggests that even though the total volume is accelerating outwards, the speed at which the wavefront passes any given point appears constant to us as observers.
So the edge seems to move steadily, but the whole thing is puffing up faster overall.
Kind of like that, yeah. He even hints this might be like a pre-programmed feature of the universe, that the apparent constancy is part of the design, even if the underlying process is acceleration.
Wow. So are there potentially other constants or laws we take for granted that might have this kind of hidden complexity? Things that could affect us in ways we don't realize?
That's exactly the kind of question it raises. And this leads him to the broader implications. He uses this term perfects.
Perfect.
Yeah, his term for people striving for logical understanding, for perfection in thought, maybe. He says these perfects need to develop an intuition, a feel for antilogic everywhere.
In personal life, work, society.
And especially, he emphasizes, in education.
Ah, education. What's his critique there?
He makes this really sharp observation that often secondary school, like high school, it doesn't really teach us how to learn.
What to learn, maybe.
Exactly. And it doesn't always nurture that natural curiosity kids have. It kind of gets stamped out in favor of memorization or ticking boxes. Does that sound familiar from your experience?
Oh, totally. Yeah. You learn for the test, not always to actually understand or explore.
Right. And he sees a similar problem bleeding into higher education too, even in really practical fields like engineering.
How so? You'd think engineering would be very result-oriented.
You would. But he argues that universities often flood students with tons of information, theories, methods, but don't adequately prepare them for the actual doing of the job, getting real-world results.
So lots of knowledge, but maybe not enough practical application or readiness for the profession.
That's his point. There's a disconnect.
Yeah.
And he ties all these educational shortcomings back to that core idea of toxification by Antilogic.
Meaning, this way of educating actually leads to people making poorer decisions later on, tactically, strategically.
Yes,
Yeah.
at an individual level, and maybe even shaping how society functions, leading to illogical choices on a bigger scale.
He sounds quite frustrated by this.
He does. He uses the word tober, which is like disappointing, a shame, maybe even frustrating. He says it's a shame for us, for humanity.
Because we're caught in these illogical loops, holding ourselves back.
Seems to be his feeling, yeah. It's a call to really examine the logic or anti-logic embedded in the systems around us.
Okay, so our mission here was to understand anti-logic, spot it, and think about responding to it. It feels like the first step is just awareness. Paying attention.
Absolutely. That vigilance he mentioned.
Yeah.
Be vigilant. That's his closing advice. Because seeing the antilogic is the first step to maybe countering it.
Right. So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Beyond just the speed of light example, think about other things you assume are fixed or straightforwardly logical.
In your own life, your work, how you see the world.
Could there be hidden complexities, maybe even inversions, anti-logic, hiding beneath the surface of what seems obvious? Where might things not quite add up if you really look critically?
It's definitely something to chew on. That deeper look might reveal more than you expect.
Definitely food for thought. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.